Hey, it's IB Countdown to Kickoff. Hope you're having a good one after last week's home opening win over Tennessee State. Notre Dame is on the road for the first time, taking on North Carolina State, and we are here to talk all about both of them, really, along with Vince D'Addario and Jesse Stiers. I'm Sean Stiers, and what just happened? Did somebody open up a window and stick their microphone out there? And are you? Neither one of you looks like you're driving down the road, but it sounds like one of you.
It did sound that way. Yeah. Well, not from this end.
Yeah.
Must have been me. I think I fixed it, though.
Okay. Yes. It is gone now. It is gone. Well, Jesse and Vince could both be distracting because as we record this podcast, they've got the Cubs game on in the background. Vince is going to try to put on his blinders right now. We will see. We'll see who wants to actually take the first question. Notre Dame won 56-3 over Tennessee State. So biggest takeaway, guys, was what?
The biggest takeaway is that they're 2-0 going into their Power 5 conference, Power 5 part of the schedule, or the beginning of the Power 5 part of the schedule. And, they're not banged up. I think the offensively, so my biggest takeaway is the productivity of the offense, right? It from top to bottom, play calling, the efficiency of it, 12 drives, 11 touchdowns, 1 missed field goal. It's about as efficient as you can possibly be offensively. And I'm excited to see what this offense is and can be against a Power 5 defense, because we haven't seen that yet. But I feel real good about that coming out of these 2 games.
Yeah, I would say my biggest takeaway from the game was, again, the mental kind of discipline of the team. Not a lot of penalties, being able to execute when you're still dominating a team like they have been. And then the ability to get not only your second string in there, but your third string in. I think it's valuable, and it's something that we haven't seen in the past. Sam Hartman was out of there by halftime. I can't remember the last time a Notre Dame quarterback was out of the game at halftime on their own accord, essentially. Notre Dame willingly taking them out of the game. So to me, it's the mental discipline of dominating a team that you're supposed to dominate, handling what you need to, and then getting depth guys in there, getting those guys who are probably not going to see the field very much, some action, and seeing what they can do on the field outside of a spring game or practice. So I think that was my biggest takeaway of the game.
And I think it's interesting that you bring that up, the fact that Sam Hartman was out of there by halftime, the fact that he has led 12 offensive drives through basically a game and a half, and they have scored touchdowns on 11 of them. And the other one, of course, resulted in a missed field goal by their new kicker, Schrader, who has only had the one opportunity to try to kick a field goal so far. But it's fun to beat up on Brian Kelly. I mean, and let's face it. I mean, it's a great sport, right? Beating up on Brian Kelly.
We're all playing varsity for that.
I was thinking about this week, and I never brought it up because, I mean, Brian Kelly is such an easy punching bag but do you think Brian Kelly would have pulled Sam Hartman at halftime and let Steve Angeli go in that early in a game?
I don't think so at all.
That's my inclination.
I don't think he would won, and I don't think Notre Dame would have been winning by that margin at halftime if Brian Kelly were the head coach, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's zero chance, because we've seen Notre Dame in blowouts before, and that has never happened. And I mean, okay, let's go back to the last season one of the last times they were undefeated, 2012, right? They started out the season in Dublin, beating the crap out of Navy. They could have taken the quarterback out at halftime if they wanted to. There's been plenty of instances where the possibility has been there and it hasn't happened. So we have plenty of empirical evidence that we can all, I think, very strongly say that was not going to happen. And
I agree.
I'm very happy that it did happen for many, 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 many reasons. And it just shows you that things are just different. Things are different these days.
Yeah, different mindset, different way of doing things, and I think that it is all for the better. Even though, as we've talked about with Marcus Freeman, there were growing pains last year. There could be more growing pains this year. I mean, there was an instance where the defense only had 10 men on the field. It's basically the biggest flub that we've seen, and that led to Navy's field goal, I believe, right? And that short pass that was short of the end zone that ended up being incomplete, but they only had 10 men on the field. it's really the biggest flub that we've seen, because as much as we've talked about organization and all this different stuff, that's really it. And to me, my biggest takeaway from this game really kind of relates back to what you're talking about. It is the depth, really, especially through these first two games, that Notre Dame has been able to display and that Marcus Freeman talked about this week.
The ability to play so many guys, especially in the first two games, but this past game is going to be tremendous. And I don't know when it's going to be needed, but it will be needed. It's guaranteed. We're going to have to, over the course of a 12-game season, you're going to have depth, and at multiple different positions. For me, for Steve Angeli to go out and perform the way he did, I was extremely pleased. Right, to go back, and I know we kind of talked about it after the game. It was hard to have a great feel right after the game, but to go back and watch it and see some of the execution he made in terms of the checks. There was a third down corner pressure on. He checked it to the wide out to Jaden Thomas. It was awesome to see him do that, and really some of the balls he threw and a couple hits he took. That's the guy that sticks out in my head. That was, man, you don't know when you're going to need Steve Angeli. We're going to need him. And Kenny Minchie did a good job in his 5 plays, right? And I said he's 100% completion right now, and so that's pretty good. But we will need multiple guys throughout this course of the season to get them valuable, meaningful reps is so important.
Fast Fingers Freddie sitting next to me during the press conference on Monday for that. Jesse, you were saying something about a buzzer before Marcus Freeman started talking there. What do you need the buzzer for?
I need a buzzer I need to indicate that I have another significant thought that I can't let go of.
Okay.
I'd be remiss if I didn't say my biggest takeaway was the defensive performance. They have given up no touchdowns in 2 games so far this season. And that's, again, that goes back to having mental discipline of, even when you're blowing a team out and your second stringers are starting to work in on the defense. I think it's still very impressive that they have not given up a touchdown yet on defense.
And that's when you typically, like, you had a football coach in a high school who was afraid to put reserves in late in the game just because he didn't want to give up a potentially meaningless touchdown, because he wanted to make things look good when it was all said and done. And the fact that in both of these games, you have seen second and third string guys in late in games, and they still haven't given up those kind of, if you want to call it garbage time touchdowns. Second and third string defensive guys are still keeping the opposition out of the end zone.
Well, yeah, not only that, but, jumping back to the offensive side, and he talked about Steve Angeli and what he was able to do. The other thing that Brian Kelly would have never done is put his second string quarterback in with the first string offense and let him run the offense.
Yeah.
That would have never happened. Anytime a backup got in, it was garbage time, number one. It was probably for one drive, and it was all handoffs, right up the middle, whatever. Like, we got to see Steve Angeli run the offense, and that's
with the first string guys, like you're
yes.
And we were talking about that as it was happening up there in the press box. And that's important, that you're not just sending out the entire second team, but you're letting your number 2 quarterback go out there and run the actual offense with first team guys around him, giving him first team protection and first team guys to throw to, hand to, the whole thing.
No chance we see that in the last regime. 0 chance.
Yeah, I think what Marcus Freeman was talking about, the biggest thing in terms of depth, it's nice to get a lot of these running backs, wide receivers, etc., some playing time, because it's going to come back and help them down the road when they want their best athletes on the field against Ohio State, USC. It's not just a starter's game. These guys need to have the experience, and it's nice to get them experience early, so then when they get to these other games, there's no deer in the headlights. They've been here, they're comfortable with the situation, and it's time just to play ball at that point.
Tennessee State's, to your point, Jesse, about the defense, their offense gained 55 yards on that first drive that resulted in a field goal. They gained 101 yards the rest of the way. And, again, an impressive defensive effort, I think. Just as a guy, Jesse, who has so much experience in your life from a football standpoint, playing on defense, and Vince, you can talk about this, from the other side with the offensive background that you had. Just the fact that these were Navy was the season opener, obviously, but for Tennessee State, it was their season opener. And we've seen Notre Dame, those first couple in both of these games, the defense kind of on its heels maybe a little bit because they're seeing things that weren't on film, but then they were able to make adjustments as they went along. Just, talk to that a little bit, guys.
Yeah, so it's something that's actually very noticeable in Al Golden's defense is like those first drives seem like a kind of, like calibration drive for the defense. I think they noticed things that maybe weren't on film. And those first 10, 15 plays from an offensive standpoint are scripted. So you're going to probably have stuff in there that you've been practicing that you believe is going to, work best or exploit the defense, and maybe stuff that you haven't really shown on film. And so I like the fact that Notre Dame is able to, kind of adjust on the fly. And we've talked about it kind of before in the past. I think it's a credit to their linebackers with their experience and how smart they are X's and O's wise, right? Like a lot of guys on the field, when a team lines up in something they haven't seen before, it's almost kind of panic. But it doesn't really seem like that with Notre Dame. It seems like they have guys out there smart enough to go, okay, well, this is what you were supposed to do. This is what I'm seeing. And rather than panicking, it's being a problem solver and kind of figuring things out on the fly. And then you see them get better throughout the game because they get off the field and obviously they start talking about stuff on the sideline and really start figuring things out.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I think they did a very good job of recognizing some things that they didn't know was coming, right? And you're going to get that in week one. And you're probably going to get that a little bit in week two with NC State, to be honest with you. And I love the fact that this defense has these veteran guys that can get people in the right spots. And look, you can't tell me that J.D. Bertrand and, that entire linebacking core hasn't seen just about everything there is to see. Nothing's really going to throw these guys for a loop. Yeah, it might not have been in the scouting report. It might not be something that they practiced. But they're Jack Kaiser and Maris, and, say what you want to about Maris, but he's still a veteran. He's still been around the block. He still watched a heck of a lot of film, right? There's not a whole lot you're going to be able to throw at these guys that they haven't seen before and that they won't be able to get the rest of the team lined up in. And so that was actually very good to see against Tennessee State because they definitely threw stuff at them that they weren't prepared for.
And as we talked about, Navy is a one-off with the triple option. And so really, Notre Dame came out. They had to play more nickel in this game because of Tennessee State's offense. Really, to an extent for the defense, it was still a little bit like an opener because of the fact how drastically the defense is changing from one game to the next. Jess, Vince and I talked about it the other day. It felt to me, even though you saw some blitzing still from Al Golden, because Al Golden's going to blitz and stuff like that. And we're going to talk about how that does or doesn't apply to this game plan here in a little bit with NC State. Did it feel to you, though, like considering the opponent and considering you do have a Power 5 opponent this week, did it feel game plan-wise, defensively, a little bit vanilla to you last week?
Yeah, I think it's vanilla in the fact that you don't have to do too much. You don't have to outsmart yourself and playing an opponent like Tennessee State. I don't think there's much reason to deviate from your base defense and ultimately put blitzes and different kind of stunts and schemes on film for your bigger opponents down the road. I think you'll see a little bit more of that opened up this week in terms of stunts. I don't think they'll necessarily blitz too much, but they'll get into some stunts amongst their defensive line. And I think in terms of, they might bring a linebacker, but they're going to probably drop a defensive lineman off if they do that. Like, I don't see Notre Dame bringing many 5 or 6 man pressures this weekend. I see them getting creative with 4-man stunts. And whether that's, mixing in different linebackers and defensive linemen. So I think that goes to, again, you don't want to show these teams that kind of stuff on film early on because there's really no need to. You can stick in your base defense. I mean, when a team doesn't score a touchdown in 2 games and you haven't really shown much, I think things are going pretty well. And so there's no need to break out that stuff until it's required, right? Until you get into a pinch or you're trying to figure out, how to maybe stop a team on a 2nd and a 10 or, a 3rd and 10 and maybe run like a zone blitz or something like that. So I just think it's really smart to kind of hold that stuff back until you really need to start using it.
Which of the 2 lines for the Irish do you feel better about right now? Offensive line, defensive line, Vince?
This is a good one.
It's hard.
Because I don't think the offensive line played great as a unit last week, right? I feel better about the offensive line and their ceiling for the rest of the season, right? But as far as production right now, and I'm not just talking about on the stat sheet and all that, but like actually playing the game right now, I feel better about the defensive line going into week 3. I think the offensive line can match them and then surpass eventually, whether that's this week, next week, or the week after, whatever. But right now, I have a little bit more faith in the defensive line. I didn't think I'd ever say that.
It's really a toss-up for me, but I know I can't say that. So I'm going to have to say, the offensive line hasn't given up a sack in 2 games. And I know that the opponents haven't been, I guess great. But I mean, early on in the season last year, the offensive line struggled against Marshall. It struggled against Cal. And really kind of had some bad performances. But I would think I would lean more so to the defensive line just because of what they're able to accomplish in terms of depth. They have a lot of guys who can rotate in and play at a high level. And I know that's not necessarily needed on the offensive line. You're not rotating in offensive linemen, but the offensive lineman isn't dominating to the point where it's more impressive than a defensive line that has depth. And no matter who is in there, they're still going to be able to perform at a high level. So I'm going to have to say I'm more impressed with the defensive line because there's no drop off between the first, the second, and the third team defensive line that are kind of rotating in.
I have to say, I came away from last week's game kind of feeling like empty calories. Like I went to Five Guys, I got the double cheeseburger and I got the big order of fries and I totally splurged and I walked out of there. And then I've got this, then you've got that feeling like Vince doesn't know what this is like because he can eat whatever he wants, whenever he wants. But it's like, I just came out of there sort of expecting more. Like I expected a little bit more from both of them against an FCS team. Not that either of them played, really, really poorly, but at the same time, I expected sort of, a little bit more physicality, I think, on both sides of the ball that we just didn't get. And it's like, what just happened, Yep. But I agree, between the two, I definitely still come away with a better feeling about the defensive line right now, I think, than the offensive line. It's just, you have to wonder, like when you have these kind of games and those kind of opponents that you're better than, and that like are they all there mentally? Because there was definitely, especially from the offensive side, like a step slow in some cases that is going to have to be a lot better against a team like NC State today on both sides. I think
they're going to have to be more focused from the first whistle, all the way to the last whistle. I mean, there's not going to be, I can't imagine that they're going to be in a situation where a bunch of twos get in, that kind of a thing. That's not what I'm anticipating. And so these guys are going to have to be ready to play. Now, I do think the scenario of first true road game, Power 5 opponent, all of those things are going to contribute to both lines playing better than they did against Tennessee State, right? I mean, the Tennessee State game was placed exactly where it was for a lot of good reasons. And, you can come out sluggish and still win by 50, that kind of a thing. So I feel good about this team going into NC State. I feel good about both lines. I think they're going to play better than they did last week, but they still got to do it. They still have to take that step.
Yes. This, so we've had a group of 5 team. We've had an FCS team in the first 2 weeks. They're 2-0. They've done all these great things, both offensively and defensively. But doesn't this kind of feel like this is where the season really starts because it is a Power 5 team, like you just said?
Yeah. There's no doubt. Sorry, Jess, go ahead.
No, it's okay. I think we all knew that Notre Dame would win these games. What that looked like and, what the final score was going to be. I think that was the piece that was going to be, up for interpretation. But yeah, I think everyone knew that, it started here. And I think there's some people who might even be overlooking this game and say, oh, well, it really kind of starts with Ohio State. No, you can't overlook an ACC, Power 5 team on the road in this situation. So I would definitely say that this is where the season starts because you're not going to see the backups in this game, I don't think. I still think Notre Dame's going to score a lot of points and they're going to win this game rather handedly, but you're not going to see the same sort of, experimental type out of the coaches this week.
Yeah, I think things get narrowed down a little bit. You've got depth if you need it. That's really, again, like going back to the benefit of these first two games. You've got it if you need it, but I think the reps in some certain cases definitely get assigned a little bit differently if you can, like, and we've all played football before. We played different sports before. Like those first couple, whatever sport you're in, especially a physical sport, whether it's football, basketball, track, wrestling, like all these, swimming, whatever sport it happens to be, those first couple of true competitions, your fatigue factor is up a little bit more than it is when you're just scrimmaging, practicing, whatever. So like that is a thing of the past. I think there's a little bit more endurance that has been built up. So like you can lean on your number ones more if you need to, and you can still go to your number twos, but you're up to game speed a little, quite a bit more, I think, by going into this game 3 now than you would be, than your first couple of games.
Well, I also think that you're going to be up to game subbing as well. I think we're going to get more of a clearer picture who this staff trusts, like who's going to be out there in certain situations. Because look, was there ever really a high leverage situation in the last 2 games? I mean, really, like game altering, we got to get this third down, cannot punt here, that kind of stuff. No, not really. And so I think that we're going to get a clearer picture of the subbing, at linebacker, at wide receiver, all of the defensive line.
Well,
what's it going to look like in a real game?
The wide receiver rotation is really something I'm kind of curious to see who's on the field more in this game, just because like there have been some pretty disproportionate reps. Like, and this is not a knock on Tobias Merriweather, but obviously when you look at who's got the catches so far, even though Tobias had a couple last week, finally, he's been on the field a heck of a lot more than some of these other guys who have more production than him right now. And again, I'm not singling him out. Like even Chris Tyree, who's not at Tobias's position, he has a pretty small percentage of the reps in that slot so far. Do we potentially see more of Chris Tyree in this game, for example? Like, I'm really curious to see how some of that shakes out.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, we've talked about Chris Tyree being the X factor for the season. I think he could very well be an X factor in this game. Like maybe they just didn't want to have him out there as much in the first couple of games. Let's let the freshman get out there, get his feet wet. And talking about Jaden Greathouse, and yes, he's produced and he's done all of those things, and it's awesome, it's great. But and we'll see. Personally, I think Tyree should have played more, but maybe they're saving him for these bigger games. And that's fine. Let's see what happens. Like you're absolutely right, Sean. I think that's going to be very, very intriguing.
Chris Tyree, Vince, he's got a little today. This game is going to be his game. Is all I'm going to say.
Jesse's going all in on Chris Tyree.
Baby.
We're going to get to NC State and some of the breakdown here in just a second. Before we do that, it's amazing. This is only the second time ever Notre Dame has played at NC State. The only other time is the infamous 2016 Hurricane Matthew game that NC State won 10-3. And Brian Kelly decided that passing was the way to go with all that rain coming down. 3 and out, 3 incomplete passes right away. I believe I know it was 3 passes anyway. I can't remember if they were all incomplete, but in the very, Notre Dame's first possession of the game, he decided to keep throwing in a hurricane. Did not go well at all, but that's the only previous time that Notre Dame has ever played at North Carolina State. There is rain in the forecast, scattered thunderstorms for this weekend in Raleigh. Hopefully it's not going to be quite as bad as it was 7 years ago, but who do you think the rain potentially affects more in this matchup, Notre Dame or North Carolina State?
I would say that it's equal for different reasons. I think Notre Dame North Carolina State would struggle with a downhill power run game that Notre Dame could provide with double tights and Audric Estime coming down your throat. I think that is not what North Carolina State wants to get into at all defensively. But on the flip side of the coin, I think that Notre Dame would struggle with a mobile quarterback like Brennan Armstrong if the field is slippery and you're not able to put your foot in the ground and if he's trying to cut and get lateral and stuff like that. I think that's something that would ultimately, benefit someone like Brendan Armstrong. So I think it goes both ways, but ultimately I would say it benefits Notre Dame more because I just don't think that NC State would have an answer for Notre Dame's power run game downhill with Audric Estime.
That's a very roundabout way of saying exactly what I want to say because I stopped listening when you said that Notre Dame is going to have the advantage when they run the ball because I think that's going to be the end of the game. Like Notre Dame's going to be able to run it right down their throat. And honestly, I still think they're going to be able to throw the ball because it's not going to be hurricane-like conditions.
Yeah, exactly. You just have to pick and choose a little bit better about when you want to throw.
And where has Sam Hartman played the vast majority of his football?
East Coast, baby.
And in a lot of weather, you know what I mean? And so a lot of rain games, all the Carolinas, all of that. So I'm not worried about Sam Hartman in the rain by any stretch of the imagination. Now, guys have to catch the ball. Don't get me wrong. But Notre Dame has the clear advantage when they're on the field with the football. Defensively, if it's a slippery field, if it's, this, that, and the other, I still think Notre Dame has the advantage because, NC State's not going to be able to throw the ball if it's wet and rainy. And so now they have to run the ball.
Yeah, Notre Dame can load up the box.
If Notre Dame knows they're running the ball, it's game over. I mean, the only way Brennan Armstrong is going to be productive is if he's running the ball based on broken plays and if we're dropping 8 and we're doing things of that nature.
It can't be just Brennan Armstrong go run the ball all the time. And that's
exactly.
It's between the fact that he doesn't have near the accuracy that Sam Hartman does as a passer, and Notre Dame has the running game that they have. Notre Dame has the more accurate passer and power run game, better with the offensive line and the whole thing. So I think if it has to become that kind of game, it's a huge advantage to Notre Dame. When as mobile as Brennan Armstrong is, he's a far less accurate thrower of the ball, and their receivers aren't as good. And I'm not saying that they've got bad receivers, but again, when you look at their game against UConn last week, they only averaged a little over 9 yards per pass. That is, there's not much there. And when you throw that matchup against Notre Dame's secondary, Cam Hart, Benjamin Morrison, you throw Thomas Harper out there on the field as well in the nickel, and/or Clarence Lewis, who had the pick 6 last week. I think there's just advantages all over the place for Notre Dame defensively.
And whether it's raining or not, if I'm Al Golden, I feel pretty darn good about loading up the box and letting my guys on the outside go one-on-one against these particular receivers and against this particular quarterback, to be honest. So you don't want to do that every play, obviously, but I still feel pretty comfortable doing it. You know what I mean? And if it rains, that's just even more of an advantage. So, I think Notre Dame would have the advantage in the rain.
All right. Let's look at this matchup a little bit. Jesse, get your whiteboard out. Let's talk a little NC State offense, Notre Dame defense. So their offense basically goes through Brennan Armstrong, transferred, of course, from Virginia, mobile quarterback, 2 years ago, threw for over 4,200 yards, 32 touchdowns, or 31 touchdowns, rather, when he was paired up with Robert Anae, the offensive coordinator. This is by this point in the week, we've beaten this storyline up quite a bit. They are reunited, and I was at Syracuse last year. Armstrong had a down year at Virginia last year. He's been banged up the last couple of years. Didn't look great, really, at UConn last week, other than the fact that he ran for nearly 100 yards and a couple of touchdowns. Jess, do you have your whiteboard ready to go?
Yeah. Let me get it up here real quick.
I'm resisting my Michael Scott urge as you said that. So,
oh, that's good. Quality.
All right. So Vince, you feel free to jump in here anytime as well. So this is North Carolina State on offense. Brennan Armstrong, the mobile quarterback, over 1,300 career rushing yards, over 20 career rushing touchdowns including the 2 that he had last week, but most of them have come at Virginia. So, Jess, the keys to keeping Brennan Armstrong in check, not letting him get going in the running game, go.
Yeah, so in terms of, Brennan Armstrong, his first and foremost, he is a run-first quarterback, in my opinion. I think that his passing game comes second to his running game. He looks to be a runner more than he looks to be a passer. And what that means is there's going to be a lot of RPO, zone reads, and designed quarterback run plays. So what that means to me, or the guys that need to have the biggest game this week is your defensive line. And the reason why I say it's your defensive line is because they're going to be able to control Brennan Armstrong the most. And the thing that you can't do against Brennan Armstrong in this type of offense, or a mobile quarterback who likes to run the ball, is you cannot blitz these linebackers in any sort of variation, because all that's going to do is create lanes for someone like Brennan Armstrong. So I don't expect Notre Dame to blitz a whole bunch. So again, what it comes down to is these 4 defensive linemen. And to me, it's broken down into your edge rushers and then your interior defensive linemen. Your edge rushers need to be able to come up the field and play the outside the outside shoulder of the quarterback. And that means they can't get up the field too much. They need to be able to come up the field and either squeeze or condense the pocket and make sure that if Armstrong is going to go anywhere, he's going to be stepping up, the middle here into the lane. So first and foremost, those edge rushers have to be able to play the upfield shoulder of the quarterback and be able to squeeze or condense the pocket. So that's the thing I look for the most out of the outside guys. And then again, on the inside guys, their job is really kind of similar. You want to be able to get pressure and really squeeze or condense the pocket again, and allow these guys on the outside to kind of make their way in and get to someone like Brennan Armstrong. So it should be almost kind of like a party at the quarterback, and you can't allow the pocket to essentially break down and create lanes for someone like Brennan Armstrong. So in order for the defensive line to have an impact, they can't just run, typical, under or over kind of stunts on the defensive line. You got to get creative with these guys. There's got to be some sort of, twist, 4-man stunts, whatever it might be amongst these guys. Maybe this guy's folding in and this guy's replacing on the outside. Whatever that might be, there needs to be some sort of stunt. And something I like a lot is allow your defensive end to drop into coverage and bring that or your linebacker maybe off the edge. A variation of some 4-man stunts. If you're going to drop off a defensive lineman, a linebacker's got to replace in kind of the pass rush game, I guess you would say, or the containment of Brennan Armstrong.
Vince, if you're doing that, like if you're dropping off, let's say Jordan Botello, the Viper, or the other side, Javonte Jean-Baptiste, if that's what you decided to do, even though he's not going to probably be able to cover as much ground in space. Is there a linebacker you like the most, just in terms of bringing some heat on the quarterback?
Well, that's where you would have, your Maris Leofau. I think he's probably one of your better pass rushers. I think that's where you could bring in, Jalen Sneed. I think you want to give him a very singular mind, a singular thing to do, right? I don't want Jalen Sneed to sit back and have to read stuff. I just don't think he's ready for that.
One
yet.
Assignment, basically.
Yep.
Like, you're here, this is what you're doing on this
exactly
snap. Yeah.
That's exactly right. And I think that's something that you could bring him in to do. And I think you could be very effective with that for sure. But I agree with Jesse as far as how you want to get after Brennan Armstrong. The thing that you absolutely have to make sure of, though, is that you're not allowing run lanes. You have to be sound in your pass rush. You have to be sound in your rush, period. You cannot allow lanes.
And that's
unless it's a designed lane where a linebacker is filling or something along those
right.
lines. But if you give him an inch, he's going to take a mile. You just can't allow, and you're doing that to yourself. Like you just can't allow that.
And that's what I think he's saying with why you don't want to traditionally blitz the linebacker unless you're dropping a defensive end out, like a zone blitz type situation where you're dropping an end off in coverage, or even a defensive tackle, depending on who it is. You don't want to blitz those linebackers so you don't open up those run lanes
Right.
The concept of a spy, and that's something Marcus Freeman talked about earlier this week. It's like, you probably an overrated concept, I think, but what do you guys think of that? Marcus Freeman said you can't just say, well, we're going to put a spy on him all the time.
Well, I think it's a situational spy. All you got to do is, I don't think you play a spy until you get maybe definitely a third and long, because Brennan Armstrong's arm isn't going to beat you. So if you play good enough coverage, you just don't want the pocket to break down and Brennan Armstrong to be able to improvise on his feet. So I really think it's, again, like a 2nd and 15, 3rd and 10 type of spy. And you have someone designated. And Vince brought up the best names, in my opinion, the same guys that you'd want blitzing off the edge. You want Maris Leofau and Jalen Sneed as your spy guys, because they have the athleticism and the singular focus to make some good plays in open field on a talented runner of someone like Brennan Armstrong.
Something that we've seen so far through the first couple of games, we saw it more last week because they played so much nickel. Like Jack Kaiser, play in and play out, is more assignment sound than Maris Leofau. I mean, we've seen that over the last couple of years. Now, you can say that Maris has made some improvement this year. We saw 1 or 2 breakdowns from him last week. If they're going to play more nickel, that means that there's less Jack Kaiser as well. So I'm curious to see if he gets any opportunities in that nickel package as the weak side linebacker potentially. I don't know. What do you?
I just had another buzzer moment.
Okay.
To answer your question first. Yeah, to answer your question first.
Is it a buzzer or a light bulb moment?
Both.
Okay.
I don't. Jack Kaiser being on and off the field in the nickel doesn't really concern me too much, because I think they have some very good nickel players and depth players. So yes, you're losing a guy who's a very talented linebacker and a guy that's, obviously has a ton of experience and kind of one of the leaders on the defense, but I think you'll see him more so on the field than not. So that's nothing of major concern for me. But what I just kind of realized is, we talked about having guys who are able to kind of hold their own in the pass game. And if the pocket is to break down, you want guys who are able to, essentially make a play on someone like Brennan Armstrong. And so when you're talking about defensive linemen and defensive end and interior, your interior defensive linemen, I think this is a game where you might see a little bit of Junior Tuihalamaka playing as an interior defensive lineman in some situations because of the athleticism and if the pocket is to break down. I think having someone like Junior in there is a guy that would match up well with Brennan Armstrong, knowing his background as a linebacker.
Very interesting thoughts there, Mr. Stiers.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Like when you potentially line him up as an interior. Yeah.
Yeah, like on a 3rd and long type play. I definitely think you would see him as an interior defensive lineman at some point in this game.
I like your NASCAR formation. You're going to get some speed and athleticism on the field.
Yeah. All right, so that is NC State offense, Notre Dame defense. Let's flip it to the other side now, that 3-3-5 defense that we've been talking about all week for North Carolina State, and how Notre Dame potentially needs to go about attacking that.
Yeah, so let me shift this a little bit. I got a little bit ahead of myself. I want to start in the middle of the field, and this sort of looks so traditionally in a 3-3-5 look. You have three defensive linemen, 3 linebackers, and then 5 defensive backs. But those two of those defensive backs are more so considered kind of like overhang players. They're like a hybrid between a defensive back and a linebacker. But in the base, their base defense here, and that's what I'm trying to get lined up a little bit better, so we can have a better visual representation. If you were in the middle of the field with 2 wide receivers split out on each side, the primary zones that you want to look at when attacking this defense is the edges in terms of the run game. So, you want to attack kind of out here on the perimeter if you're going to run. And then if you're going to do anything in the passing game, the seams are going to be the areas of the field that are going to be, pretty open here for Notre Dame. So that's kind of why I was talking about Chris Tyree, is because if you have an inside wide receiver, you can go two routes up the seam. You can have a fast guy that you hope to, blaze down the field, or you can go with, traditionally sometimes Notre Dame will line up their wide receiver out there as well. They'll split them out there, and that would give you a size advantage up the seam. But in the basis of this defense, the 3-3-5, the weak spots of the field are the edge in terms of the run game and the seams in terms of the pass game. And what makes the 3-3-5 a very effective defense is it's high risk, high reward, and there's just a ton of athleticism and speed on the field. That's what you're going to see amongst that group of five, really, of that, linebackers or hybrids of, defensive back linebackers. There's just so much athleticism and the ability to get downhill fast. And that's what Marcus Freeman talked about in one of his press conferences this week, is these guys make it look like they're blitzing. Well, it's not that. They're just downhill quickly. They read very quickly. So overall, that is something to look for. I think in terms of what Notre Dame would do to, potentially kind of combat this defense is, let me get here I'm hitting like Control Z
Vince,
here as much as
let me
I
just,
can.
while you clear some of that off, let me ask Vince something, because to Jesse's point, like the athleticism that they have, NC State is undersized with those defensive linemen. Notre Dame's got a big size advantage, but again, as we saw last week, Notre Dame was a little bit slow-footed sometimes. What kind of concerns does that give you? Does it give you any real concerns?
I mean, it doesn't give me a whole lot of concern. I feel like, I love a three front personally. I think that I love a three front from an offensive standpoint. Let me be clear on that.
Okay. So you're saying you like to see you start licking your chops a little bit when you see an odd 3-man front.
Especially if I know that I can run the football. Like if I'm a power running team, that's my identity. Bring on a three front, okay? Because my guards are uncovered, which, obviously in a four front, that's not the case. And that means they've got a free release to the second level. And so it's almost like they get a head start to those athletic linebackers and to get a helmet on them. And then you're going to hand the ball off to somebody like Audric Estime or any of the backs for that matter, but especially Estime because of how big he is and how downhill he runs. I mean, you're giving him an advantage because he's not going to get touched until he gets to the second level potentially. And so I love going up against a three front, even at the high school level, because if you don't have a dude at the nose, you're in for a long night. And I just don't know that the nose for NC State is good enough to really wreak havoc in the 3-3-5 that NC State runs.
Jess?
Yeah, I think that what you'll see is, with the 3-man front, like Vince said, you can get very outmatched. And with Notre Dame's kind of physicality and size, I think you'll see a lot of Audric Estime up the middle. And then I was just kind of going through, how the edges provide, a weakness of this defense. I think you'll see a lot of, Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price kind of on more of those outside runs, and then Audric Estime kind of, pounding the ball up the middle. So it very well could be a very long game for NC State because of the fact that they want to go with an odd front on the defensive line.
All right. Did you have something else you wanted to draw up there real quick, Jess?
Yeah, so I think in terms of the passing game, what you would see out of Notre Dame is variations of trips. And you would see it when Notre Dame is on the hash. I don't see it as much when a team is in the middle of the field. But when Notre Dame's on the hash, you want to put trips into the field side, whatever that might be. So right now I have the ball on the right hash, quarterback and running back in shotgun, 3 wide receivers to the field side and 1 wide receiver to the boundary. Why this is significant is because what Notre Dame can do in terms of manipulation. When you go three guys to the field side here in a 3-3-5 defense, what that does is it manipulates the field side linebacker, overhang player, whatever you want to call it. He now has to displace out here. And usually what you see is he splits the difference between the number 3 wide receiver and the end man on the line of scrimmage. So he's going to be here. And ultimately what that's going to do is cause these linebackers to bump over a little bit. and then the guy the linebacker into the boundary, the far linebacker into the boundary here, he still has to stay outside here because he's got, running back responsibilities. So what does that leave? That leaves 5 guys in the box and 5 linemen for Notre Dame. That's a hat on a hat. And if you start pulling these guards like we saw last week, basically the running back just has to beat one guy or no guys as long as the offensive linemen account or get a hat on someone. So when you displace that linebacker, it creates an even matchup in the box. And then in terms of the pass game.
Well, and as you pointed out the other day, that's essentially what you're talking about is how Jeremiah Love scored his long touchdown run.
Yeah, these 2 guards pulled out in front of him. And that's exactly what you would see. You'd see both of these guards probably pulling, and they would just have to essentially, seal this overhang linebacker and maybe climb up, to this free safety that's up here a little bit. And I mean, they're off to the races at this point. So when you go trips into the field like this, you have the linebacker has to displace, and you leave even numbers in the box in terms of 5 offensive linemen and 5 defensive players in the box. But what makes this 3-3-5 difficult for someone like Sam Hartman is in their pre-snap shell of the 3-3-5 defense, they can be playing cover 1 and cover 3, and you really don't know at all which one it's going to be. And even, we've talked about in the past sending guys in motion in order to help the quarterback understand, what's going on. That's not going to help against North Carolina State because of, having 5 linebackers. These guys just bump over, it's just all these guys are going to be in line. And if you send someone in motion, it's not going to give you any tells. So North Carolina State is going to be running a lot of cover 1 and cover 3, and the quarterback's not really going to know pre-snap what's coming. So having someone like Sam Hartman with a ton of experience and being able to read defenses is going to be very beneficial for someone like Notre Dame. And then when you start going into, what kind of routes might beat a 3-3-5 defense. Well, if they're running cover 3, that they only have 3 guys dropping deep. Vince, I don't know about you, but if they're dropping 3 guys deep, I'm running 4 verts all day long.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're not. And so I think if you are a fan of the downfield ball, some deep shots that we really haven't seen yet, that's what you're going to see in this game. Because, if they're going to run cover 3 and you got 4 wide receivers, allow those guys to run 4 verts. And then kind of what I was talking about a little bit ago in terms of another of weakness.
Slow down.
On the defense is these seams. And so I think you'll see Chris Tyree running up these seams a lot, and you'll see these bigger tight ends running up the seams a lot.
Bingo bongo, baby. It just all he has to do is bend it a little bit, and then all Sam Hartman has to do is read that safety. Yep. Safety goes one way, he goes the other, touchdown. Easy.
And another thing I like is, with the trips into the field side, that leaves this boundary corner one-on-one because this safety's got to help on the trip side over the top. So look for that matchup into the boundary. I know North Carolina State, their best cover player is going to be this guy. Well, obviously, because it's a one-on-one matchup. You want your best cover corner in a one-on-one matchup. So I don't know who that's going to be into the boundary, but I think that's something that Notre Dame has practiced all week of who that is and how they're going to be, single coverage potentially into the boundary.
All right.
That's all I got, people.
All right.
All you need.
Sounds good to me. Well, guys, I've got one thing to ask you then.
Go beat the heck out of Florida State, but
I just had to get that in there one more time.
It's what we do. Whoa. Hello.
We were zoomed in there.
That's
it's
right.
We are on the varsity of making fun of Burt Kelly.
Yes. Are you ready for rapid fire?
Let's go.
Vince has been chomping at the bit all day.
I know.
Yeah. It's been a bit of a day. I'm ready for some rapid fire.
Fired up. So Sam Hartman, 0-2 at North Carolina State in his career at Wake Forest. And he does have one home win in his career against NC State. 6 touchdown passes, 6 interceptions in his career. Scale of 1 to 10. How much does any of that matter?
None of it, actually. None of it matters, not even a little bit, because I don't care what anybody says. Notre Dame has more talent around him than he ever had at Wake Forest. Period. End of discussion. You can nitpick a wide receiver here or there. Fine. but there's no way you can tell me that Wake Forest ever had a better offensive line or had better running backs than what Notre Dame has. So all of that is a moot point because Sam Hartman doesn't have to put this team on his back for them to win this game. All he has to do is turn his back to the defense and hand it off to that stable of running backs, and they're going to win the game. Now, Sam Hartman's going to do more than that, but that's all he has to do, in my opinion. And so it doesn't mean squat.
Vince took majority of my answers, so I'm going to present it in a different way that's more attractive. So what I'm going to say here is it doesn't mean anything because Sam Hartman's time at Wake Forest and now Sam Hartman's time at Notre Dame are not dependent events. They don't have any effect on one another. So what that means is Sam Hartman at Wake Forest had a horrible offensive line. He had a non-existent running game. And so when both of those things are true and you're down in a game and your only way of coming back is just putting the game on Sam Hartman's shoulder and telling him to air that ball out, 20 times in a row, of course he's going to struggle. They know what's coming. They know that the only way that they're going to beat is in the passing game. But like Vince said, when you throw in a really good offensive line, you throw in a running back room that can hit you on the edges, it can hit you down the middle, and then you throw in, the talent that they have at wide receiver, the physicality of these tight ends. It's just that Sam Hartman's workload goes down. He doesn't have to think as much. The game is not nearly as much on his shoulders. So it doesn't mean anything at all to me. Sam Hartman's prior success or lack thereof against North Carolina State.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised it came up this week because he obviously has experience against North Carolina State. You're gonna ask about that, but as Jared Parker said, you're not going to bring up negative things to Sam Hartman that you're not going to dig deep into that. Like the only real benefit is he has seen this defense before. So again, it's experience. That's experience comes.
Yeah, he knows that pre-snap it's cover one or cover three.
Right. But it's a different offensive system. It is like he had no running game at all at Wake Forest. He had to throw it 40 plus times. If Sam Hartman has to throw 40 plus times in this game Saturday, that's not going to be a good thing for Notre Dame. That's a negative indication for Notre Dame. He shouldn't have to throw even 30 times in this game. Look at what he's done the first couple games. Like if he's I would say 25-26 max. And again, he's got a running game to lean on that he never had at Wake Forest. And that's the biggest difference because he was, in addition to the interceptions, he was sacked a lot in those 3 games.
Right.
2 of them being losses. I would be shocked if he is sacked. Maybe they get to him a couple times in this game. I would say max 2 really in this game. So NC State is 18-2 at home over the last 3 seasons. Scale of 1 to 10. How much does that concern you entering this matchup?
Go ahead again, Vince.
Oh, come on now.
Cop-outs. Couple of cop-outs.
Seriously. Scale 1 to I don't know. I guess I'm not that worried about it.
Let me
go ahead.
Throw this at you guys.
Go ahead. Throw it.
One of those 2 losses was to Boston College last year. Do you remember what Notre Dame did to Boston College last year? It's not like Notre Dame is going into Tuscaloosa or Knoxville, Tennessee, or even Blacksburg, Virginia, where you've got Enter Sandman and that whole environment. This is a noon game at North Carolina State. And I'm not trying to say that there's no home environment to speak of. But again, it's not like you're going into one of the most imposing environments in college football. They play well at home, but they also lost to Boston College last year at home. That's one of their 2 losses in their last 20 games at home. Yeah. BC, a team that Notre Dame that did not belong on the same field with Notre Dame last
It's
year.
on the road. So, it's okay. It's on the road. Yeah. It's not like it's on the road and between the hedges or, any other place that's difficult to play in. It's NC State, man. How often were we told that it was super hard to play at Virginia Tech because of Enter Sandman?
Exactly. And then 5 minutes into the game, it's a non-factor.
Right. It was cool, but that's it.
Yeah, so for me, scale of 1 to 10, this is like a 3 overall. And the only reason I'm giving it a 3 or acknowledging it to any point is because really, being on the road, that doesn't do anything for me. Being at North Carolina State, that doesn't do anything for me. You can throw both of those out the window. The only thing to me that I think has an effect is that it's a noon kickoff. And I spoke about this just a little bit this week. That's just an earlier wake-up time, an earlier preparation for these teams. And the only players that ultimately might affect are some of the young guys, right? Because you don't want them staying up late the night before. You want a good night's of rest. You want to get up in the morning and get the body going. So again, the only thing to me that has any sort of effect is you might be sleepwalking a little bit because it's a noon game, but I don't anticipate that happening. I'm just saying it's a possibility, and it's the only thing that would give me, put that ranking up to a 3 out of 10 for me.
In typical Jesse fashion, he just combines two questions in one point. Like the noon kickoff thing was a question that was coming up. So I'll just let Vince go. Jesse's already answered that. Vince, the noon kickoff means what for Notre Dame?
It means I have to miss my son's soccer game. That's really all that it means. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean much.
I mean, they were practicing at 9 o'clock in the morning, during training camp, right?
Exactly. And just dealt with, the time change going to Dublin. And they've done all these things. Like, they didn't show to be any worse for the wear based on when they were playing the game. You know what I mean? And so I don't think the noon kickoff means much of anything, especially this early in the season. Maybe if this was like game 7 or 8 when they haven't had a bye and, they're locked into kind of, when they play and all these. So far they've played. Now it will be 3 different times. They're not locked into any normal. There's nothing that's normal.
Very true.
I don't think it means squat.
Yeah, and it's a great point. They've already adjusted between going to Dublin, coming home, playing a 3:30 game, and now you get a noon game. So it's only a little bit earlier. Yeah, it's on the road, but they took off at like noon, I think, this afternoon. If I saw the tweet, kind of around that time, noon, 1 o'clock, something like that. So they're already out there. They're going to get into their, they'll do their walkthrough at the stadium today, and then they'll get up probably, 6 a.m., 7 a.m., probably around 6, have their breakfast and get on to the stadium and do their thing. They're used to, again, they had 9 a.m. practices during training camp. So it's not like they haven't gotten up, and it's not like, to your point, it's not like they're into the season and they've played all these night games and now they've got to adjust and come back to noon. So I think that it means next to nothing as well. I'd probably give it around a 2 or something like that. If I was
the funny thing is, so game 1, 2, 3, all different times. Game 4 is going to be a 2:30 start. So that's going to be different. So that's 4 different start times. And then technically game 5 is that game against Ohio State that starts at 7:30, which I guess technically it was 7:30 our time when they played in Dublin. But you could make the argument that that's a different time as well. So, I mean, they're going to have 5 different start times in 5 games, really. So start time's not going to make a darn bit of difference.
Quarterback aside, what position group are you guys most confident in right now?
I am most confident in – can I do offense and defense, or does it have to be –
if you want to.
Yeah, defense. Defense, I'll go defensive line, just because of the depth that they have overall. I haven't seen them do anything, I would say, catastrophic or make any sort of huge mistake. In terms of the offense, I got to go with the running back room, just because of the depth and the way that they can slice you and dice you up, Vince, because I think all these running backs can do just a little bit of different things compared to each other. They have things that they're a little bit better at, comparatively across the running back room. So I like the running backs just because they can run it down your throat. They can get you on the perimeter with some of the speed. They have guys who are very good in the pass pro.
Is he still talking? You made your point. It's the running back room. Can Vince talk a little bit now? Come on.
I might just, have to.
Mr. Filibuster.
He takes himself right out of the show.
He just jumped right out. Go ahead, Vince.
He finally got the right answer, and it was running back room for the offense. There's no doubt about that. That is by far the one I'm most confident in. Even if you threw quarterback in there, it would be a toss-up between the running backs and the quarterback, if I'm being honest. Now, if we're going to play the Jesse game, we're going to go offense and defense, then I will say the corner back room would be the one I am most confident in on the defensive side. Yes, they have not been really tested yet this season, and that's a big question mark going into a game like this. Still the corners, man. Like, you got 2 potential All-Americans playing your 2 cornerback spots. So defense for me, it's corner.
It should be. I mean, everyone should be excited to see Notre Dame have an opportunity against a team like North Carolina State to see those corners in action. You're right. They haven't, because they played Navy, and there's been like 1 completion on Benjamin Morrison through the first 2 games. Again, you take that with a grain of salt. A little, they did try to throw at him last week, so it's not like they weren't throwing at him, but there was the 1 completion. So I think it's going to be. It'll be a good matchup for them today. And I completely agree with both. It would be corners on defense. We heard enough about the running backs. Jesse gave his running back breakdown. It's the running backs on offense when you look at the depth of that room. Is there a group that you have maybe the most questions about right now?
No, not going to go with this. We're not going to filibuster on this one. I will say, if we're going to go both sides of the ball again, I guess I'll go safety, just because I'm not 100% sure who that second guy is. I got a lot of faith in Xavier Watts. I just don't know about the other guys.
And we haven't seen him really get challenged deep yet.
Right.
That's something that's – and I think that's something that NC State will try to do today. Again, even though they didn't really do that much last week against UConn. Their longest pass play was 19 yards against UConn. I think that they're going to have to try to challenge Notre Dame's secondaries deep in this game. And Armstrong's got the arm to do it.
Yep. So safety, and then offensively, I'll say wide receiver, just because Notre Dame hasn't needed their wide receivers yet. They haven't needed them to go up and get a 50-50 ball or a big, third down catch, or it just hasn't been the case where that's needed to happen. So it's more of a question mark because we just don't know, more than I'm not confident in them, if that makes sense. So that's why I'll go with wide receiver.
I'm going to go defensively safeties for a lot of what Vince was talking about. They've been tested downfield, and against some of these opponents, it's, who's the legit number 2. So, yeah, I would go safeties on defense. And then I was going to say wide receivers on offense, but I don't want to copycat Vince too much here. I would say that wide receiver, the only thing I'm looking for is who's gonna step up in the big moment. There's been no big moments yet, and so I want to see, and not that they haven't stepped up. You know what I mean? It's just when the pressure's really on, who's going to be the guy that you could ultimately rely on. So that would be if you were the Chiefs, it's not going to be Kadarius Toney. But
man,
to me, I got to go with the offensive guards, because yes, they've played well. But there's a ton of inexperience, and they haven't been really tested yet.
Seriously, Vince just the hand triangle as a receiver. Like, what were you taught when you were young? Catch the ball like that, right, Jess?
You're right.
Like that was a total hugger move. A guy in the NFL with a total hugger move on that. That drop was brutal.
Cost me a decent amount of change last night, because I needed Mahomes to go for 250, and he was about 225, and all those Toney drops really screwed me last night.
I agree with the defense. It would be safeties. Not that there's any poor play going on, but just because they haven't been challenged enough, we haven't seen it yet against a Power 5 traditional offense. Offensively, for me, coming out of last week, it's more the offensive line that like Blake Fisher got beat a couple times last week. Again, like, you wouldn't think that you would see that against Tennessee State. That interior had a little bit more issues, sort of reacting quickness, that kind of thing. So they've got, again, especially against this kind of defense, they've got more questions, I think, to answer to me today, or in this game against North Carolina State. It's the offensive line. Yeah. All right, now's the fun part. I mean, it's all fun, but now's the really fun part, because now is when we get to some of the game props. We all had an assignment. Vince halfway met his assignment. We were to go to a sports book app, build a 3-leg parlay for this game. Now, we were supposed to take a screenshot of it and send it to Jesse. Vince texted his, like, you can build the parlay without actually betting it.
No, you're right.
Right.
The app I use doesn't usually have the player props.
Okay.
It's always game props, and it's very annoying. And a lot of times the player props will come too late.
Right.
Right. So, yeah, I didn't even look. I didn't even.
That's okay. That's okay. So here, Jesse. Man, what is this? Okay. It says Dad. That's me.
That's you.
Here's my 3-leg. I've got Notre Dame minus 7.5.
Yep.
Favored by 7.5. I've got Chris Tyree to go over 28.5 receiving yards. And I've got Audric Estime to go over 79.5 rushing yards. Are you in like with that? Do you feel that?
Yeah, I definitely dig that one for sure. Because I mean, it's right there on the page, but I agree with you on the spread for sure. And I think I'm kind of along the lines of where Jess is at as far as Tyree having a big game. 28.5, that might be one catch. So,
yeah.
And Estime is going to have a big day because I just don't think this 3 front is going to be able to stop number 7.
I don't either. Not at all. All right. So that's mine. Vince, go through yours.
Yeah. So I took Notre Dame minus 7.5. I think that's just a sucker bet. I took Hartman over the 229.5 because I do think I don't think he's necessarily going to be the focus, but I think they are going to try and stop the run early, and that's going to allow Hartman to go for it and really hit some passes. And I think he'll be over 229. And then I've got Estime getting in the end zone, some form or fashion. I think that's going to be pretty easy.
The only reason I didn't want to touch Hartman's passing props is just because of the uncertainty with the weather.
Sure.
Coupled in with, if Notre Dame, we think they're going to be pretty successful in the run game. I generally think he's going to be over in the passing game because I agree with Jesse's breakdown earlier. I think there's going to chance to see a couple big passing plays, at least a couple big passing plays in this game. But I didn't want to touch that just because I wasn't sure with the weather. Jess?
Yeah. So I'll get into mine now. I actually did. And for everyone out there, the reason why we kind of did this is because FanDuel was offering a 50% boost on same game parlays. It just needed to be 3 legs or more. And so I screenshotted it and sent it over to my dad and said, this would be a fun segment this week because they're offering, a 50% boost on a single game 3-leg parlay. So I love Sam Hartman's. I don't understand this because his passing numbers are always underrated in my opinion. And I don't know if that's just because of, again, the running attack that Notre Dame potentially has. And so that's taking away from the passing game. I still think Sam Hartman is easily going to crush over, 224 passing yards. So I took that. I think Sam Hartman, just like he's done in the first 2 games, is going to have at least 2 passing touchdowns. I just think Notre Dame's going to score a lot of points again. So I don't think it's going to be mutually exclusive to rushing touchdowns or passing touchdowns. I think there's going to be a little bit of both. And so I took the over on the Sam Hartman passing yards. And then I took Estime over on the 77.5 rushing yards because I think they're going to try to really run him down the middle early in the game. And I think they're going to really run him down the middle to finish the game, being kind of the big physical back that he is. And another reason why I like Sam Hartman's passing yards over is because I think NC State is going to come out and have a concerted effort to stop the run game because they think that they're going to be able to stop Sam Hartman in the pass game because that's what they've done in the past. They've stopped him in the passing game, right? He hasn't had as much success against NC State as he has against other people. So I think that's going to lead to a little bit of overconfidence. And Sam Hartman's going to have a little revenge game and show these guys that, yeah, I can pass all over you if I want to.
All right. I did another 3-leg as well. I still had Notre Dame minus the 7.5. The over under for this game is 50.5 points. And I have them going over, and I also included Estime's yards. Again, the only hesitation I have on the over 50.5 points for this game is the weather. Like that, sure. If the weather is a factor, it's going to push the points down. Again, it's not going to push it down, I don't think, as far as it did 7 years ago when Notre Dame played out there in the rainstorm, but I think it pushes it down a little bit. Chris Fallica, Jesse showed me this. He tweeted this. He's the guy used to be Bear on used to be on College Game Day. He's on Fox now. The Irish have won 15 straight true road games as the favorite going back to 2017. Last time they lost when they were favored by at least a touchdown on the road, 1999 against Stanford. So
Wow.
a lot of history in Notre Dame's favor going into this game. Again, like going back to that NC State great at home and all that kind of stuff. We'll go through these props. We don't have to be real detailed. We'll kind of just bust through them here real quick. The game over under 50.5. Are you guys generally in favor of the over on this?
If it was a home game, yes. The weather, like you said, has me worried. I just when any kind of weather is involved, I kind of stay away from the over under for total points. It scares me, to be honest with you, because it could go either way. I'm afraid of that. But if you're putting a gun to my head, I'm going to go with the under. And that's more along the lines of I don't think NC State's going to do their part.
Yeah, I took the under in this case too because Notre Dame's defense has been dominant, hasn't given up a touchdown yet this season. I think this game could easily turn into like a 38-10, like a 41-10, type game. So I think Notre Dame is definitely going to hold its end of the bargain. I just don't think NC State is going to score quite enough, and it's just that number is just a little too high for my liking.
You guys both included Sam Hartman's over as part of your parlays. 224.5 was the last number I saw. I'll go over as well. Brennan Armstrong, 230.5 yards. Over, under.
Under. I'm taking the under.
Oh, yeah, this is a big under.
Yeah,
under as well.
I think he's going to be forced to throw the ball a lot, so maybe he accidentally goes over. But I just do not trust the arm of Brennan Armstrong in any way, shape, or form in this game.
I think it's just sidebar, right before we go on, it's actually insane to me that Brennan Armstrong has a higher passing yards than Sam Hartman does in this game.
That's criminal.
I agree. And that's, again, it's like you go back to Vegas and it's like the numbers that they have given Sam Hartman and the Irish in general on some of these props, in these first few weeks.
Eat it up.
Completely. I don't know. All right. So we're under on Brennan Armstrong's passing yards. How about Armstrong's rushing yards? 35.5 rushing yards. Over, under.
I'll take the over on this one. It's the biggest part of his game, and if they're going to have any sort of success, he's going to need to be able to run the ball. I mean, they have quarterback design, run plays. So I'm going to give it the over. He was their leading rusher last week.
Yep, I agree. I think that you're talking about an entire game of 35 yards rushing for a guy that's his primary thing. So I'm going to take the over as well, but I still don't think that's going to help him out.
I'm going to go over, but here's something interesting. When we talked about quarterbacks and rushing against Notre Dame the last couple of years, Vince, you brought up Caleb Williams for USC last year. You know how many yards he had in that game? I don't know if you remember off the top of your head.
No.
35.
Did he really?
35. So he was a half, like if you would have bet that, half yard under, because the Irish at least sacked him a handful of times.
I was going to say sacks fall into this as well.
Yes.
Yeah. He had 54 net, or he had 54 gross yards, but the net was 35 because he was sacked and they had 19 yards in losses. So,
yikes.
Interesting.
And I think Notre Dame's going to get to Brennan Armstrong. He does not have the best pocket presence.
And I think he'll have over the 35.5, but I don't think it's going to be like much more than 50, honestly. I don't think it's going to be much more than that. It'll be right around there, maybe. Audric Estime, 77.5. Everybody going over on that?
Yep.
Give me the over.
Chris Tyree's receiving yards, 28.5.
Give me the over on that seam, baby. That's one catch right there.
Pound it. Pound the over.
Yep.
Jaden Thomas, 54.5 receiving yards. This is a really good number.
Yeah,
right
it
here,
is.
Actually,
I think this one is spot on, but I'm going to take the over because I think that he's emerged into Sam Hartman's like big body target. And I think if someone's like the most reliable, I think I think Sam Hartman would consider him his most reliable wide receiver. And he's hit that mark, I'm pretty sure, in both the games so far this season. And so in a game where, Sam Hartman's probably going to play the entirety of the game, I see him hitting that over.
Yeah, I mean, I think, a few third down conversions here, there, that kind of a thing. I think he is the number one receiver, as we predicted in the beginning of the season. I think, he's the go-to guy. And even if it's raining, it's probably going to be over. But this is a tough one. This was one I would actually stay away from, again, because of the weather.
Yeah.
I don't want to touch this one at all.
But if you had to.
I'm hedging towards under, honestly.
Ooh.
Just because, and it's not because I doubt Jaden Thomas. It's because, like, Chris Tyree, and especially, like, could this finally be the breakout for Tobias Merriweather when we're talking about some of those deep shots?
Sure.
Like, I could see, I mean, Thomas, Greathouse, both. So I'm hedging under. This is why I don't want to touch the Jaden Thomas, because
I'll throw it out there. I think
factors.
Rico Flores is going to sneak into a big pass play at some point in this game. I think he might only have a catch or two, but I think it's going to be a big one.
Yeah. Audric estimates minus 240 to score a touchdown.
It's terrible odds, but you still take it.
Yeah.
I know.
I put it in one of my bigger parlays, but I mean that it seems like every first touchdown is an Audric estimate running touchdown, like up the middle.
Armstrong plus 140 to score a touchdown.
Those are pretty good odds. He scored 2 on the ground. Are we talking it has to be rushing?
Yes, he has to score a touchdown.
Okay, he has to carry the ball
right
across the goal line.
He has to be the one scoring, not throwing.
Right. I mean, I would not take it because I think that Notre Dame is going to keep him out of the end zone.
I do too. I would not take it.
I would take it because if someone it's juiced, it's got plus money on it, and so I think if someone does score for this team, it's going to be Brennan Armstrong. Like I think they score one touchdown, but if it's gonna be someone, I think it's gonna be Brennan Armstrong sneaking in a busted run play towards the end of the game. So that's the only reason why I would take it.
Greathouse, I would not take it either. I think they'll keep him out of the end zone. I think that like all the talk has been on Brennan Armstrong in this game. I would be shocked, knock on wood, but I would be shocked if like Brennan Armstrong just has this massive game and carries NC State to a victory over Notre Dame. Greathouse has plus 165 odds to score. Thomas has plus 160. Do you like either one of them to score a touchdown?
Honestly, in terms of wide receivers, everyone's getting in on it, and there's just not enough consistency right now. And so I don't feel comfortable saying this guy or that guy's going to score because it's just who's going to be open. Sam Hartman's going to throw the ball to whoever's open. And so that could be Rico Flores this game. That could be Jaden Greathouse. That could be, a tight end streaking up the seam. It could be anyone. And so it's so hard right now to pinpoint who's going to be that receiving guy. So I would stay away from those. So I'm going to say no to both of those.
Yep, I would stay away from both of them as well for the same things that Jesse's saying. I mean, I think a couple of games in, let's see who kind of the favorite receiver is. I know I just said that Jaden Thomas, I think, is that guy, but Sam Hartman doesn't care when it comes to touchdowns. Like, he's going to throw to whoever's open. And so any one of these guys has the possibility of getting open. So I would stay away from that as well.
I think I think for these kind of props, the receivers to score or tight ends to score touchdowns for the rest of the season, I think it is fool's gold to be chasing any of them because of what we're saying. I think it's going to be game to game, week to week. So I would not touch any of them in terms of receiving touchdowns. So this is not a Vegas number, but over under 180 rushing yards for Notre Dame in this game.
Take it away, Vince.
I would take the over. I think they're going to get a lot of yards on the ground. I just don't think NC State can stop Notre Dame's run game. And it's really, honestly, it's going to depend on Jared Parker. Where does he want to punish this NC State defense? Does he want to punish them on the ground, or does he want to punish them through the air? If the weather is a factor, if it's raining, then they're going to punish them on the ground. They're going to get to 180.
I agree.
Yeah, so against Tennessee State, Notre Dame ran the ball for 221 rushing yards. Against Navy, it was 191 with an odd three-man front. I really think that they'll hit this 180. I think they'll be around like 200 rushing and like between 250 and 300 in the air.
I agree. Spot on. That's kind of what I'm thinking for Notre Dame in this game. All right, some other games this weekend. Colorado, a 2.5-point favorite at home against Nebraska. Do you like the Buffs and Dion, Coach Prime, to be 2-0? You like them minus 2.5?
Yeah, I took the straight up victory here. No spread for me, but they are the favorite in this game. It's just, Nebraska's not back. They're still bad. They don't have a lot of explosiveness on offense. And if Dion gets out and gets a big lead on Nebraska, I just don't see them catching up, to be honest with you.
It's crazy. New head coach, Matt Rule. Nebraska looks like they're in the driver's seat against Minnesota. They find another way to lose a one-possession game last week, even with a new head coach. I like Colorado, the points as well.
Nebraska plus 2.5, just to be different.
I included this one just because the spread is so large. Georgia plus 43, or Georgia minus 43.5 rather, versus Ball State.
I'm going to actually say Ball State covers that spread. Yes, it's Georgia. I don't know. I for some reason feel like that's just too big of a spread, and they don't have like a quarterback that's just gonna, kill you anymore. Like Stetson Bennett wasn't like a tremendous quarterback, but he still made it to the NFL. I just don't even see this quarterback as quite as good as Stetson Bennett. So you know what? I'll take Ball State. Why not?
Yeah, I tend to agree. I don't know. Look, Georgia's still the number one team in the country.
Right.
They're still going to score a bunch of points, but Ball State, they're not an FCS team. They are still, they're still playing D1 football. I would hope that they could keep it within 43.5, but watch them prove me wrong.
I'm gonna say Georgia covers. I think they smother poor little Ball State. I don't think that they've got a chance.
Poor Ball State.
Iowa is favored by 3.5 against Iowa State. I'm not as interested in the line in this game as I am the over-under because of the whole can Iowa score enough points thing. Yeah, 36.5. Over-under 36.5 points in this game.
I mean, that's like almost saying the game's like, that's like a 21-14 game, like a 24-14 game. Yeah, 24-14 would get you over the top. I'm going to go with the under, to be quite honest with you. I still don't think Iowa's got yes, their defense is good, so I think they'll limit Iowa State, but I don't think their offense is ready yet, and I don't think that they're going to put up a lot of points. So give me the under in 36.5.
Man, that's such a low-scoring game. But I know, like, the drive for 325 or whatever it is a real thing, which blows my mind, by the way, that they would even put that into a contract. I feel like his dad wrote that in as a caveat. But, I'll take the over and just hope that the kid from Michigan can rack up a few points here in this game against Iowa State on the road.
Iowa was favored by 13.5 against Utah State last week. They did not cover. Cha-ching me. They also combined for 38 points in that game. I don't think Iowa, they won 24-14. I don't think Iowa is going to break 20 points against Iowa State.
Bad.
So I'm going to go under. I'm going to go under the 36.5 in this game. I think it's going to be very ugly, and Kirk Ferentz's son is going to, unless he dials this up here pretty quick, because I think I think they're going to have a hard time scoring again this year. They only scored 24 against Utah State last week.
325. Ole
Miss favored by 7.5 against Tulane. Won the Cotton Bowl last year.
This is an easy one. Ole Miss is covering that 7.5. I don't see Tulane being as good 2 years in a row. So I think this is an easy cover for Ole Miss. Actually,
this is a cover by halftime.
I think so too. I agree. Texas A&M minus 4.5 against Miami, the Hurricanes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I took Texas A&M to beat Miami in one of my bets. What that looks like, I don't think that they're going to win that game narrowly by 3. So I actually see Texas A&M covering in this game.
I see Miami getting inside of that, if not winning outright. I have zero faith in Texas A&M at this point. Their coaching staff, their players.
Let it be known.
None of them. I don't have any. I have no faith. I don't even have faith in the 12th man at this point. So
you know what? We picked this game, and I can't remember what I picked because Brian sent us the matchups late. So I'm not even going to touch this one because I don't want to contradict myself. What I said.
I may have just contradicted myself. I'm not.
I know.
I'm honestly not sure.
I'm
actually going to look to see if I contradicted myself. Nope, I got Miami winning by 7. So
okay.
Go Canes.
Good for you. Alabama's favored by 7 against Texas. I have Alabama winning this game. I don't think they cover that. I think it'll be relatively close. I mean, it was really close last year, and Alabama escaped. Texas not back. I've got Alabama winning, but I've got Texas covering that 7.
I think they definitely cover. I think I had Texas winning outright on our picks. Not by much, like a field goal type game, that kind of a situation. I just don't know that I'm sold on Alabama's quarterback situation. And if we're just comparing quarterbacks, Texas is the better team, right? And so, yes, Alabama has the better program. Even if Texas wins, are they back? No.
Texas had some troubles. Like they've got Quinn Ewers has weapons to throw to. Texas had some troubles against Rice last week, trying to protect the quarterback. So
they did.
Yeah.
I got Alabama winning this game and covering the 7-point spread. And I like this game to actually stay under the 53.5.
Okay.
I don't see Alabama scoring a lot, but I see their defense keeping them in this game and doing enough to win.
USC is a sorry, go ahead, Vic.
I've got 45 total points, so I'm definitely on the under as well.
Okay. USC and Stanford. This is obviously a couple of Notre Dame opponents. USC is favored by 29.5, and the over-under is 69.5.
Give me the under and give me Stanford to cover the spread.
Oh man, I think USC wins by 40. So I will.
I don't think Stanford's as bad as everyone wants them to be.
Oh no, they're bad.
They were surprising against a not horrible Hawaii team last week.
Yeah, I'll still take USC in the minus. I'm taking the under because I just don't think.
But you got to realize USC's defense struggled against San Jose State.
Right.
USC can't score all those points by themselves, so I'm taking the under in points.
I'm going over on the points, and I like Stanford to cover because that USC defense is not good. So I like Stanford to score a little bit, and I like them to keep it within reason. I don't know. So I like Stanford to cover, and I like the over 69.5. So I'll be really curious to see. And I can't remember. Again, I might be contradicting myself. I know I've got USC winning, but I can't remember what my point total was. I've got some points being scored. I know I have Stanford covering that, though. Let's just go right to. Do you guys want to do the Dion question, or do you want to skip him and just wrap it up?
Dion talked this week, so we should get into our game predictions.
Let's do it. Notre Dame, North Carolina State. What do you got?
I have a 41-10 victory for the Fighting Irish. I think they get 5 touchdowns, 3 in the air, 2 on the ground. And I think that NC State will sneak in a garbage time touchdown late in the game, and they'll sneak in a little a garbage field goal early in the game. Sign me up for a 41-10 Notre Dame victory.
I like it. I like where your head's at. I think that would be more along the lines of my score if there wasn't going to be any weather. And so I dropped it just a little bit. I'm 35-17 in favor of Notre Dame. This game comes down to one thing and one thing only, and that is Brennan Armstrong. If they can keep him in the pocket and force him to be an actual Division I quarterback that throws the ball, Notre Dame is going to run away with this. It's not even going to be close. I think, of those 17 points, I think maybe 10 come in regulation, and then like 1 is a garbage, like Jesse was saying. But I don't see this game being all that close. I think, Notre Dame knows what they need to do to win this game, and it's limit what Brennan Armstrong can do. Yep. And they're going to do it. Like, I just don't see them not doing it, and I have a ton of faith in this offense. So 35-17.
Yeah, I think NC State will have some early success because that's essentially the MO against the now Golden defense so far, is maybe they have some success in the opening drive. After that, I see it mostly being a long day for North Carolina State. The weather, again, could be a factor. If weather is a factor, I think it favors Notre Dame because they've got the more accurate thrower of the football and they've got the much better running game. I found it interesting looking at the predictions that Brian posted on the website today, irishbreakdown.com. We all picked North Carolina State to score 17 points. We had Notre Dame, different totals for Notre Dame, but we all had NC State scoring exactly 17 points, which is very interesting.
Be different, losers. 10.
I've got Notre Dame winning 38-17 in this game.
We're all in that 35-41 range.
Yep.
We can't be different if we don't know what the other person's choosing, Jesse. It's a blind vote.
Right. That's right.
Well, you all work together, so you're all thinking along the same
Great
lines.
minds.
But we didn't collab on any of it. All right, that's going to do it for Jesse, for Vince. I'm Sean. Of course, there's a post-game show after the game live, and of course, we'll be here Monday on IB Nation Sports Talk. That's going to do it for today. Enjoy the game. We'll talk to you next week.